some reason, I'm the only person in the house who can find things. And it gets me out of the moment when I'm trying to write if I need to find someone's My Key card. I'm Kate Solly. My latest book is The Paradise Heights Craft Store Stitched Up with Affirm Press, and it's out now. It's a cosy mystery, and it's kind of like if Miss Marple or Nancy Drew were a mum with young kids. That's sort of what I'm going for there. She is still trying to find her way in motherhood. Fleck Parker is my protagonist. Still trying to find her way in motherhood, and she's trying to find something that's just for her. She loves a good puzzle, adores the Wordle, cryptic crosswords, and she might discover in that solving crime is just for her. It's her thing. It also looks at crafting, which I love to talk about. There is a craft store where she's learning some different hobbies with her new friend Trixie, who's very bold and has bright green hair. And then when Trixie is accused of stealing money from the store, which is a charity store, it's up to Fleck to clear her name. So when it comes to having a target audience, I don't always think that way. I like to write the sort of book that I would like to read. And I sort of really want to make my siblings and my mum and dad laugh. I think whenever I'm telling a story, it goes back to me at the table. I come from a large family, one of 6 kids, and there was my mum, my dad, and my grandma. And we all talk about our day at the end of the day around the table, and I wanted to hold everyone's attention for the longest. And so to tell a good story meant that you could be in the centre of attention, and being in the centre of attention is my favourite place to be. So it's a long game, writing a novel. You write this long novel and then you get to be in the centre of attention for a bit. This is my second novel. They're standalone from each other. I would say they have similar feels, even though technically this one's in a different genre. This one's a mystery, whereas the first one was more feel-good fiction. They both have a similar flavour despite that. I like to think I write with warmth and humour, and I like to focus on small things. I like to look at domesticity and things that people might think are mundane and ordinary. That's my favourite thing to write about. You know, trying to take the kids to Aldi. That's what I want to write about. I don't know that I'm a full-time writer, but writing is my main job. My main job is raising kids at the moment, and writing is what I do as well. I have 6 children. Some of them are getting older, so it's getting easier. My routine has changed over the years. I think that when I was writing my first book, I was really trying to fit it in the edges of the day. I would get up early and sometimes go to a cafe to write. When it was the lockdowns in Melbourne, I would write in my car a lot. I wrote in a tent for a bit. My husband set up a tent so that it was a place I could be that was away from, because I need to be away from my beautiful kids, because otherwise they need me to find things for them. And just for some reason, I'm the only person in the house who can find things. And it gets me out of the moment when I'm trying to write if I need to find someone's My Key card. And so David set up a tent behind the garage, and the kids sort of forgot I was there when I was there. And he managed to set it up with a little space heater and Wi-Fi. And so I work in a desk in the tent. These days they do go to school. And so I do have that time when they're at school to work. But having said that, it can be a bit of a trap because you have all this time, which isn't really that much time. And also all of the housework and that is just sort of there. And you're like, oh, maybe I should just put a load of dishes on. And oh, maybe I should just hang out a load of washing. And then the writing doesn't happen. So I need, I haven't really given up those scraps of time in the edges of the day, because I find sometimes I still do my best work when I've only got this amount of time to do it. And so I still get up early and get a bit of work done. I still like to take the scouts to their thing that's in Whoop Whoop and then hang about in a cafe somewhere and work while they're there. There's nothing else for me to do while they're in their scouting thing except for work on the book. And I can trap myself in that way to get work done. Sometimes that can be better than the time when they're at school. This is a tricky one. If you could have dinner with any author, living or not, Who would you choose and why? And that's tricky as well, because if it's like an author who's a good cook, like I mean like a recipe, like if I could have book, yeah, maybe I won't do recipe book authors because that's not in the spirit of the question. I find it hard to go past Jane Austen. I'm a great lover, or maybe Lucy Maud Montgomery. I do love Anne of Green Gables is one of my all-time favourite characters. I just think she's just jumps off the page. So maybe one of those two. It's interesting when you think about the role of writers these days. It's something I think about a lot because there's that question hanging in the air of, well, couldn't a computer do it these days? Couldn't you just have an AI novel? And I mean, I hope not. But I don't think I'd ever want to read a novel that's AI. I mean, I could cope maybe with a real estate ad being AI, but a novel is ultimately a conversation. I am always looking, when I'm reading a book, I'm looking to be in relationship with the author and to sort of know them through their characters. And I don't think AI could ever do that because a computer doesn't have a soul. And I'm looking for that soul. Even in the paciest crime thriller, I still am looking for the soul of the author in that because I feel like we're in a relationship while I'm reading that book. And I think there is perhaps more than ever need for that these days, for that human connection, I think is what we get when we read a book. I like reading the sorts of books that I like to write. I also like to read because that's what I'm setting out to write. So things that are feel good, things that are hope-filled. I find I love a pacey crime thriller as well. But if I can get a pacey crime thriller that still has that bit of hope in it, I really like that. I will read grim things, but I find I need a palate cleanser afterwards. I can't read too many grim things in a row. I love literary fiction. I do find sometimes I read books that I love, but then I also feel like, oh, I could never write like that. It's painful when it's so beautiful and so beautifully done that I think, oh, there's that pain. And then there are other books you read where you're like, now how did they do that? Like how did they get... I recently read a Christian White, and the whole time I knew there was going to be a twist because that's how he writes. I'm like, oh, and then about halfway through, I'm like, oh, I got it. I know, I'm a writer. I know what it's going to be. I've worked out the twist, but that's all right. Well done. Nice try, Christian White, but I've got it. And then I got to the twist. I'm like, what? That was not what I thought. And it still came out of nowhere. I was like, how did he do that? Because it's all there. It's not like he's cheating us. And I like to read widely. I will read occasionally a nonfiction as well. But yeah, I do enjoy a good read. Audiobook, physical book, all the things. I love the physical book. I read before bed sometimes, but I tend to fall asleep. And I'll get my best reading in. I've just arrived just a bit early for the school run, and I read in the car. And then sometimes I'll read while the kids are having a bit of a play after school as well. When I was very young, of course, I loved Enid Blyton and Roald Dahl. And I read a lot of like Nancy Drew as well. And I tried to go back and look, she doesn't hold up. But it was that idea of when I was a child and I would go to the library at school and I'd look over the shelves, and if there was a new Famous Five or a new Nancy Drew that I hadn't yet read, it was like gold, and I'd grab it and I'd love to read it. Some were better than others. And just to try and find out who did it. And I think that's what I've been trying to do with this book, is have that same cozy excitement of finding out who did it without it being too traumatic, in its grittiness. Monica McInerney, I read a little while back, and Tony Jordan sort of showed me that you could have fiction that was chatty and engaging, and it didn't have to be a certain way. It could be like chatting to your friends, and that was a revelation to me, and something I wish to emulate. I am working on another Fleck Parker mystery, and this time she still wants to solve crime, and Trixie is still in her corner, her best friend, and this time something's going awry at the miniature railway where her husband volunteers. And so it's up to Fleck Parker to solve the mystery, and it might turn out to be a bit more than, she might have bitten off more than she could chew. Thanks so much for having me, Katie.